Imagine you're a woman in Thebes and somebody hauls you in because your husband is accused of robbing a tomb. You're not handed a lawyer. Nobody politely explains your rights. Instead, the questioning begins with a rod. Your hands are struck. Your feet are struck. Then they ask you what your husband stole. Yeah, that's a pretty brutal way to refresh somebody's memory. And here's the question that should bother you. What if they don't believe your answer? Because in ancient Egypt, women could own property, divorce husbands, testify in court, and bring legal cases. But when the machinery of punishment turned toward you, those rights could become very damn fragile. That contradiction matters. Because ancient Egypt was not simply a place where women had no legal identity. In many periods, Egyptian women had unusual legal freedom compared with women in several other ancient societies. They could control property, inherit, make contracts, testify, and in some circumstances walk away from a marriage. So, quick reality check. This is not a story about Egyptian men spending 3,000 years inventing special torture devices for women. That would be bullshit. The uglier truth is more complicated. Women could be recognized as legal persons and still be beaten, imprisoned, economically ruined, mutilated, or killed when they collided with the state, a criminal investigation, or palace politics. Take the woman from the opening. Her name was Enroy, a Theban woman connected to a priest accused during the great tomb-robbery investigations near the end of the New Kingdom. The surviving account says she was questioned by beating with a rod, with blows applied to her hands and feet. Then she admitted that her husband had taken copper from a tomb and that they had sold it. Think about that for a second. The beating wasn't the sentence after conviction. It was part of getting the testimony. That is seriously fucked up, and it creates an obvious problem. If pain is part of the interview, how much confidence should you place in whatever comes out of the suspect's mouth? Ancient Egyptian investigators were not exactly running a modern evidence lab here. If somebody knows another blow is coming unless the answer sounds good enough, well, people say things, and prison could come before anything dramatic happened. A Middle Kingdom record preserved in a Brooklyn Museum papyrus refers to a woman imprisoned at Thebes after leaving her district to avoid compulsory labor on a royal estate. Women also appear among prison records from ancient Egypt, although far fewer female prisoners are preserved in the surviving evidence than male prisoners. That sounds almost boring next to mutilation or execution, but imagine the reality. You run from work you don't want to perform, you get caught. Now the state physically controls where you sleep, where you go, and whether you ever make it home. Historical governments were very creative when somebody else was doing the suffering. Now we need to talk about adultery, because this is where modern retellings often go completely off the rails. You'll sometimes hear that an Egyptian woman caught committing adultery automatically had her nose cut off, or was burned, or was executed. Nope, not that simple. Surviving legal evidence shows that divorce and financial loss could follow adultery. One University of Chicago overview notes that a spouse divorced for fault, including adultery, could lose a share of jointly held property. It also emphasizes something people conveniently forget. Adultery was condemned for men as well as women. Could violence happen? Yes. Could an angry spouse seek revenge? Absolutely. But formal complaints involving adultery were not normally resolved with violence in the surviving evidence, though some texts suggest private retaliation could occur. So that popular claim that every cheating Egyptian woman immediately got her nose chopped off? The evidence does not support treating that as some universal rule. History is disturbing enough. We don't need to add bullshit. Now, nose and ear mutilation itself? That part is very real. New Kingdom texts record mutilation as punishment. In the judicial record surrounding the conspiracy against Ramesses III, severing the nose and ears appears alongside execution, suicide, and lesser punishment. And mutilation had another cruelty built into it. You survived, that sounds merciful. It absolutely was not. Your face could carry the punishment afterward. There was no resetting your life when the sentence ended. The injury went with you into the market, into your household, into every conversation where somebody stared half a second too long. The authorities could punish the body once and let everybody else keep reminding you. Jesus. Imagine realizing death was not the only thing to fear. Women also appear around the tomb robbery investigations in a way that shows how wide the net could spread. One surviving record lists 11 wives of accused tomb thieves among women who were imprisoned. Another list of suspected tomb robbers actually includes women, and Enroy, remember, was questioned violently because of what her husband had done. Sometimes the crime was yours. Sometimes the danger came from the person sleeping beside you. And here's the nasty little secret about systems like this. Guilt isn't the only dangerous thing. Proximity is dangerous. Knowing something is dangerous. Being married to somebody who knows something can become dangerous. A piece of stolen copper could drag an entire household into a nightmare. Then we get to the palace. And this one gets much darker. Near the end of the reign of Ramesses III, a conspiracy formed inside the royal household. Queen Tiye was connected to a plot intended to replace the king's chosen successor with her own son. Palace officials and women associated with the royal harem became involved. This wasn't some juicy legend invented centuries later. The Turin Judicial Papyrus preserves proceedings connected with the conspiracy, and the punishments were vicious. The document records execution, what may have been forced or pressured suicide, mutilation of the nose and ears, and one much lighter case involving only a severe reprimand. 6 women appear among those condemned to execution. 6, and this is where the record becomes cold in a way that almost feels worse than a dramatic description. We don't get their names. The male conspirators are named and discussed individually. The 6 women are simply unnamed wives within the condemned group. A scholarly analysis of the papyrus points out that many individual male conspirators receive more space in the document than all 6 women combined. Yeah, important enough to kill. Apparently not important enough to remember. And Queen Tiye herself gives us one of the strangest loose ends. She is named as a major figure connected with the conspiracy, yet she does not appear among the preserved lists of people whose punishment is clearly recorded. Her final fate remains uncertain. Now, this is exactly where a bad history video would invent something spectacular. Secret execution chamber, poison, burning alive, whatever gets the thumbnail glowing red. Nope, we don't know. Maybe her fate appeared in material that disappeared. Maybe her case was handled separately. Maybe there's another explanation. The records go quiet. And sometimes, we don't know is creepier than a made-up answer. Because the worst punishments women faced in ancient Egypt were not one neat list of special female punishments. The reality was stranger. A society could recognize a woman as a property owner, let her appear in legal proceedings, and allow her considerable control over her own economic life. And that same society could have officials beat another woman's hands and feet while asking questions. You might own a house. You might inherit land. You might leave a husband. You might testify in court. And if palace politics, forced labor, theft, or a criminal investigation swallowed you, those rights did not magically stop the rod. So go back to that woman in Thebes. Hands hurting, feet burning, officials waiting for an answer. Maybe that was the cruelest part. Not that every Egyptian woman lived in constant terror. They didn't. It was knowing that if the wrong people decided your name belonged in a case, your life could suddenly depend on what happened inside a room whose rules were controlled by somebody else. And sometimes, thousands of years later, all that survives of the woman who entered that room is a line saying she was punished. Or worse, no name at all.